I do like being right. Ask my ex-husband.
Happens every time.
Welcome back to the Boris Dirk podcast. Today, Max, my co-host, tore his right ACL, or actually he tore it several days ago. But today, Dr. Riley Williams at HSS, no, that was Darren Williams' knee doctor. I don't know who Max's doctor is, but he has a torn ACL. How are you doing, man?
I am hanging in as best as can be. Hoped. Yeah, tore it 10 days ago. I had a bit of a hunch, but was initially diagnosed with an MCL sprain. So I had a bit of false hope for about a week. And then had an MRI yesterday and confirmed today that I tore it. So this is the origin story for the biggest basketball podcast
Yeah.
in the world, the Boris Dirk podcast. It's all the way up from here. Blast off time.
Who do you think is the best coach left in the playoffs? Right before we got on, I told you just think about a potential remaining coaches draft. I still feel weird about Taylor Jenkins and Mike Brown being on the board because that's how much confidence I have in the Lakers and the Warriors meeting up in round two. But yeah, who's your favorite coach left?
It's got to be Spoelstra. Like, that's the easy answer. But when I look at, and we're going to get into this Milwaukee Miami absolute shocker that happened over the past couple of weeks, but when I look at the guys on that team, like, it's Jimmy and it's Bam, and then it is a whole bunch of players who are either way past their prime or undrafted, just sort of guys Miami picked up off the scrap heap. And they knocked out the team who I thought was the favorite to win the title and who many thought were the favorite to win the title. And they didn't just knock him out, they knocked him out in 5 games. Like, the fact that they were cobbling together lineups with Haywood Highsmith and Gabe Vincent and 30 however old Kevin Love and a Kyle Lowry who's really ceased to be a functional player much more than like once every few games. It's astonishing. And like, but that's before you get to their bench, which is like Duncan Robinson and Cody Zeller, like back from the dead. It's just a total zombified Frankenstein's monster sort of team, and he just gets them to play every night at a level that's way higher than I ever expect.
Yep. I agree with you. Spo's number 1 on the board. Instead of continuing with the coach draft, that will just kind of naturally happen. Let's talk Bucks Heat. And I don't know what to make of Jimmy. I don't know where to place him. He's only getting older. I don't know where he's going to rank in my players rankings going into next year. If he carried the Heat to a championship, I wouldn't know where to put him on my list. Like, if he loses in the next round to the Knicks, I wouldn't know where to put him on my list. Make the Jimmy picture make sense.
I don't know if I can do that. He just had the best series of his life, which is a high bar because he's playoff Jimmy's had some moments, but this was like, he was great against the Celtics last year. He had over 40 in game 6 to force a game 7, but he had some duds in there too. Like, he was dealing with a knee injury, had some games scoring in the teens.
He was better than Tatum. He was better than Tatum in that series.
He was better than Tatum, yeah. When they made the finals back in the bubble, he had some really good games in that final series, but they lost, and none of them approached what he did in that game 4 with the 56, and then followed it up in game 5 with, what do you have, 42, and then the layup to send it to OT, which like might have been an offensive foul, but they're not going to call that at that time.
Don't even start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just flabbergasting. Every year he turns into a 40% 3-point shooter when the clock strikes April. And and he just it really he's completely confounding because, like, in one game I'd want him over Tatum. I think I'd want him over Embiid in one game.
I'd want him over Ja.
I'd want him over Ja. Yes, I'd want him over,
It
Who
gets
else would I want him
crazy.
over?
I want
Yeah,
him, I want him over KD.
I don't know if I'd want him over KD for one
But
game.
but the thing is, peak KD is not giving you much more than Jimmy just did in that series against
Yeah,
the title favorite. Or were the Suns the Vegas favorite going into the playoffs? I don't know, but fuck it. It's the
I think
Giannis,
Boston was.
the king of the world's team and the one seed in the East. And as you pointed out, not just an 8-1 upset, but a 5-gamer, which an 8 seed hadn't been the 1 seed in 5 games since they played a 5-game series maximum. Thanks, Elias Sports Bureau. And so this is insanity. The only reason I'm saying Jimmy over KD is because like what you can't play much better than he just did in that series. And so like let me just go full recency bias. I think I'd rather have this version of Devin Booker. But like we can talk about the Suns later. What the space that KD has opened up for Devin Booker has unlocked a level of Booker that I didn't even know possible.
That's the thing.
Yeah, so
That's the thing, because everything Jimmy's doing is so self-created. Like we're gonna get to this when we talk about the Knicks and the Heat and what that series might look like, but they
right.
don't have any other shot creators on this team. It's just
Thanks, Verizon. Technical difficulties, and we're back, and we were talking about the Heat.
what I was saying. The Heat only have one shot creator. It's Jimmy, and then it is a bunch of guys who rely on kickouts like Struess and Robinson and Vincent, and then Bam, who can like maybe create his own offense, but usually what you're getting from him is a jump shot from the elbow, which is, you know, it's not what anyone draws up as their best offensive option. So
Maybe
with
Budenholzer, right?
maybe Budenholzer. Well, Budenholzer's drawing that up as like, let's give them all of those that they want. But we'll get to him. But yeah, I think like when you're looking at Jimmy versus someone like Booker, just the amount of space and offensive talent that Booker is operating with around him is just such a different environment from what Jimmy's seeing. Also, it makes it all the more impressive is that Jimmy did all of this against Drew Holiday. And Budenholzer and the Bucks. I don't know. Maybe it was like out of maybe Holiday has an ego and he doesn't want to be like switched off of him. He's like, I'm the best defender in the league. I can guard this guy. But clearly, over and over again, he couldn't. And they weren't really setting doubles. They're just getting into their same drop coverage every possession. Jimmy would come off the screen. He'd be able to pull up for whatever 18-footer he wanted. And then once he got going, he would, Holiday wasn't big enough or physical enough to really bother him. They never tried putting Giannis on him, which I don't know if that was his back thing or what. After the game, Giannis said he would have liked the shot to have tried to guard him. Pretty crazy that they didn't even try that. But yeah, Jimmy doesn't make sense. In the regular season, he's like a fringe all NBA player. And in the playoffs, he is a superstar. There's no other way about it. He's a top 8 player in the playoffs. And he just had maybe the most impressive single series. He's not 8. He may have just had the single most impressive series that I've seen recently.
The Bucks are so schematically dependent on pesky guard defenders like Javon Carter and Drew, with those what are those called? Back or
rear view contests.
Rear view contests. And Jimmy's just too big and too strong for those guys to bother him. So when he got through that point of attack defense, so much of the Bucks contingency plan after that is like, just we're going to swallow up everything around the rim. And Jimmy is so comfortable operating in those mid spaces. So it just felt like he could get separation and get a high quality 2-point attempt whenever he wanted.
Yeah. By the way, on the Drew Holiday defense thing, I'm wondering if maybe there was a little mix up in the voting or something in the Athletics player poll. Because there's a lot of groupthink about Drew Holiday being the most underrated player in the NBA. And I feel like at a certain point when everyone is saying that this guy's the most underrated player, he's not the most underrated player anymore. And if anything, I think he might be starting to get a little overrated because, well, maybe not after the series, but I think coming into this series, he might have been a little overrated because his defense is great, but he is limited in that with his size, he can't really go up against the big wings, like can really give him trouble. He can try, but he's much more effective against kind of ones and twos. And then similarly on offense, he has some real, offensive duds to his name. Even in the Bucks run to the championship, he had a lot of like 4 for 20s, 3 for 15, 3 for 12. Like he had some real bad shooting nights.
He even did that. He even did that in Tokyo when he was arguably the second best player on the gold medal team. His defense was just elite, so his inefficient shooting was an afterthought. But I don't know if we need to get on the bandwagon of Jrue being overrated. I do agree with you that most underrated player in the league is such an oxymoron, but maybe Jrue is pretty close to what we thought he was.
Yeah.
One of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and not a guy that can lift your offense over the top when Giannis is shooting under 50% from the free throw line.
Yeah.
And, moving on to the Bucks, I'm not feeling quite as pessimistic as a lot of the news cycle will want you to feel about Giannis. Like,
same.
We all know he was hobbled. Everyone's banged up right now, so it's not a complete excuse. And obviously, this makes best player in the world a little bit more of an interesting conversation. It feels like Jokic is playing for the belt right now in round 2 against the Suns. But if the Suns win round 2 and Jokic isn't, like round 1 Jimmy Butler level, Giannis will still have a really good argument for being the number 1 guy. Yeah, he missed a good portion.
Basically 3.
Yeah.
Basically, he missed 3. He played like 9 minutes in the first one, and most of those minutes were after he fell. And then he missed games 2 and 3, and then came back in 4 and 5. And I mean, he had a triple double, maybe in both games. He had 38 in game 5, but obviously the 10 of 23 or whatever it was from the free throw line, maybe even 10 of 25. Loomed pretty large. And it's tough because, he had that finals closeout game where he really needed the free throws and he went 17 of 19. But then, you have a game like last night where 10 of 25, like even if you shoot 25% on those 15 free throws that you missed, which is atrocious, you'd have won that game in regulation. So
yeah. And so I'm not too low on the Bucks, but like, you look at their ages on their roster, and like this was the year that everything was lined up, and windows close quickly, usually quicker than we expect them to.
Yeah.
And I don't think Bud should be back. I think like if there's any sort of jolt that they can give themselves, it's a new voice in the locker room. And it doesn't mean Bud wasn't integral to everything they built the last few years, but much like European soccer clubs that are like moving on from a guy who won them a Champions League 3 years ago, I just think like sometimes it's best for all parties. And Bud was in a dark place in that post-game interview. It seemed like he was ready to go.
Yeah. And he's presided over a fair share of collapses and some near collapses too. Like they had a nail-biting run to the finals once they made it there. They swept the Heat in the first round, which was really impressive at the time because everyone sort of was like, oh man, they it was the 3-6 series. Yeah. And it was like, oh man, they could have gotten the Knicks or the Hawks, but they got the Heat. And then, it was a really close game 1 and they beat the crap out of them the next 3 games. By the way, a big part of that, which the Heat, I think, are also dealing with, is the fact that they had PJ Tucker, who's like not going to light up your offense or anything like that, but just his presence allows you to really be flexible on defense in a way that when he's not there, you just can't replicate. And they tried to do that with Jay Crowder. They gave up 5 second-round picks for him, and I think he was a DNP in game 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, Giannis had a great quote after the game where he said that he thought the Heat were playing to beat them and the Bucks were playing to win the championship, and they kind of got ahead of themselves a little bit. And I could see that. He's always got such great quotes. I just love that guy so much.
Yeah, his whole post game was great. I'll say, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I was more impressed by Giannis's round 2 against the Celtics last year than I was by his title run. I was a hater up to that title, and then I submitted to his royalty. And then last year, I gained a whole nother level of respect for Giannis. That's like the
Yeah.
Bucks had no business taking that to 7 games, and they probably should have won. Some things didn't go their way late. Jason Tatum had the game of his career, game 6 in Milwaukee. But yeah, I think the Bucks are going to be right there in the mix next year. And this was one of those statistical anomaly outcomes.
Yeah, I sometimes I just wonder if all the discussion about basketball is useless and it really comes down to just Miami was a 34% three-point shooting team in the regular season, and in that
Yep.
series they were a 45% three-point shooting team, and just the extra points that they get from that like is basically what was the difference between them last year as the 1 seed and them this year as the 7 seed by record and 8 seed after the play-in.
Yeah.
But,
I told you, dude, it's time for an avant-garde podcast where we just press record, we say 3-point variance, and then we end recording.
that'll be the next episode. They were up 12 with 5 minutes left in the game 4. They were up 16 at the start of the 4th in game 5, and they just completely shit it away, fumbled it. They've got some big decisions coming up this offseason with Middleton, Brook, and Budenholzer, whatever they decide to do there.
Yeah.
Nick Nurse is sitting there. I don't know if they tend to be a franchise that seems to be pretty loyal to their guys. They've had chances to fire Bud in the past and haven't done so. It seems hard to believe he could keep his job coming out of that, but you never know. If they do get rid of him, I feel like this roster with Nick Nurse is a championship roster. I mean, I think with Budenholzer, it's a championship roster. I just trust Nick Nurse to shepherd it there a little bit more. And then I think you have to keep Brook Lopez at all costs. He's a free agent this summer. I think he was at times their second best player this year, certainly their third, or most important. And that's another credit to Budenholzer, as he totally changed who Brook Lopez was as a player, revitalized his career, made him a top level center in the league. And then they have to figure out what to do with Middleton, because I mean he did have a decent series statistically against Miami, but really all this year didn't look like the guy that we'd seen in the past. So
yeah,
he's got an extension decision coming up.
This might be cruel to Budenholzer, but it just seems like all his strengths are utilized before and after the games are played. And
yeah.
If the Bucks already have this infrastructure and this culture of winning established, then maybe it's time to get someone who specializes in mid-game adjustments, in figuring out ways to spice up the offense and get Giannis going downhill. And will adjust defensively when you have like a mid-range anomaly like Jimmy breaking your system. But he deserves a lot of credit, I think, for building them up to the point that they now need, the in-game wizard.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's no understating how shocking of an upset I think this was. Like,
Yeah.
And it does show that there isn't as much separation between the teams this year. Like Milwaukee was the best record in the league, but their net rating was, pretty middling historically. The Cavs had the best net rating in the East, at least.
That meant a lot.
Yeah, that meant exactly.
The Cavs had the best defense.
Best defense, second best net rating behind Boston, I think. And here we are with 5-seed Knicks hosting 5-seed Knicks hosting the 8-seed Miami Heat in the second round of the playoffs, and the Knicks are a slight favorite in the series. I've checked. I was shocked by how easy the Game 5 win over the Cavs felt. Like that's the best I've been watching a Knicks game this whole playoffs, this whole series, except for the one we blew them out in Game 3. But it was just we had kind of just broken them physically. Like Allen and Mobley were completely overpowered by Mitchell Robinson throughout that series, and by the end, I mean, he had 11 offensive rebounds in Game 5. When it comes to playing the Heat, they're not going to let the Knicks punk them like the Cavs did. Like the Knicks really bullied the Cavs physically, but there are some physical advantages that the Knicks are just gonna have over the Heat. The Heat are a really small team. We saw that in the play-in game where Atlanta just smashed them on the offensive glass, and that's all the Knicks are trying to do. They're going to have Hart, Mitchell Robinson. If Julius Randle's healthy, Julius Randle just flying around trying to get rebounds. And on Julius Randle, I think this is a series where the Knicks really need him. I think against Cleveland, he was going to be bothered always by Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, their rim protection and their size. But when he's got Caleb Martin on him, or a very old Kevin Love, or if they put Jimmy Butler on him, or Max Strus, those are matchups that he has to dominate, and that he can dominate in a way that I think he wasn't able to against Cleveland. So they'll have to monitor his ankle. But I'm curious to hear what you think about that series, because I kind of have a lean.
I don't know. It feels like two like bubble teams meeting in the Sweet 16. Like it's like
Yeah.
my bracket's broken and I'm done pretending to have any answers whatsoever.
Yeah.
My heart is telling me Miami because I'm just used to watching them pull series out of their ass. But my brain, I mean, the Knicks it was just such a more convincing team effort. Mitchell Robinson's physicality. I mean, oh my God, Jared Allen was praising him for like 10 minutes of his exit interview. And
he broke him.
There's been some writing about Mitchell Robinson, how like when he was injured, he took his cardio to another level.
Yeah.
And man, does it show. He is just like such an insane athlete right now. The length and quick twitch combination, has to be on the floor at all times now. He's a must play. It doesn't even matter if he's missing every free throw he takes.
And when he comes out, Hartenstein's a perfectly suitable replacement too. But Mitch really just totally ate in those last few games, especially. He really started rolling as the series went on. I'm very curious to see how soon into the series Miami puts Jimmy on Brunson defensively. Because my guess is they might start with Caleb Martin on him just to kind of give Jimmy, just see if they can make do with that. I think eventually they're going to end up putting Jimmy on Brunson, and I'm very curious. I think Brunson's going to struggle with that more than he struggled against Cleveland, because Jimmy's not just a good defender, but he's big, he's physical, he's mean.
Yeah.
Like Brunson's not going to be able to out physical Jimmy Butler. And that's why I think Randall needs to be healthy and have a good series. But I think Brunson will cook anyone else on that team. Like, I don't think Gabe Vincent's not slowing him down. He's going to hunt Kevin Love. He's going to hunt Duncan Robinson. He's going to hunt Max Strus. Kyle Lowry.
With Oladipo done, I think the Heat are probably most comfortable with Jimmy and Cody Martin, I think, on Brunson. And is it Caleb?
Yeah.
Damn it. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some box and one action, because like I've seen the Heat go to that. So that would be interesting. I feel like they'll probably mix in some zone, especially when Julius Randle's on the floor.
They definitely might mix in some zone. One thing all basketball coaches are terrified of with zone, though, is getting crushed on the boards. And
Mitchell,
if the Heat go to zone and the Knicks get them out of it, it's probably not going to be because of 3-point shooting. It's going to be because of rebounding, I think.
It'll be because Mitchell Robinson has like 4 offensive rebounds in a quarter.
Yeah, or in a minute.
So there's that. Yeah, he could tip it to himself.
Yeah. Also, the Knicks are not going to hesitate to double Jimmy and to just make anyone else beat them. We saw this against the Cavs, and the Cavs had Garland too. Like, they had another shot creator, but the Knicks were like, we don't care about anyone else. Donovan Mitchell is not gonna beat us. Whereas the Bucks were like, we're gonna stick to our scheme. We're gonna keep Jrue Holiday on Jimmy, and like the math is gonna work in our favor. The Knicks will be like, screw that. Hart is on him, but we're doubling hard. We're, changing up the screen coverage, throwing lots of different options at him. I think they have a few different bodies they could throw it in between Hart. Grimes can do a decent job. RJ, I thought, actually played pretty good defense in the Cleveland series. And as long as he can stay down on Jimmy's pump fakes, has a decent chance of doing a little bit on him. Maybe we'll see a little bit of Deuce McBride. They could throw some Julius on him if they just want to kind of like bump him around a little bit.
What happened to Quentin Grimes? He was the best player on the roster like a year ago.
He missed the last 2 games of the Cleveland series with some sort of shoulder injury. He was questionable to return for game 5, and they held him out. I feel like he'll be ready for game 1 of this series. I'm pretty sure it's just a contusion from what they've said. We're gonna need him to shoot a lot better this series. He didn't really get going at all in that first series.
Yeah.
But with Tyler Hero being out for this series, which I think he's still supposed to miss this whole series, given that he broke his hand. As I said, the Heat only have one shot creator, and the Knicks are not going to hesitate to make anyone else beat them. So, and I think the Knicks have a big depth advantage too, because their bench, as we saw in the Cleveland series, can really fuel them. Obi Toppin filled in really nicely for Randall when he went out in the second half of that Heat series. So, assuming the Knicks have Randall like by game 3, I think I'm leaning Knicks in this series. Everything matchup wise makes me think Knicks. The only thing that makes me scared is the Heat have Spo, which is a coaching advantage against Tibbs, I think, where the Knicks had the clear coaching advantage in the first round. And they have Jimmy, who might be Michael Jordan, but yeah.
Might be his son. I think I really want to see the Knicks embrace, if especially if RJ is locked in like he was in the second half of this past series with the Cavs. You've got that good RJ, then give me the sort of pseudo 4-guard lineup of Brunson, IQ, Hart, RJ, and Mitch.
Yeah.
And spread them out. Let Mitch rim run and, vertical spacing from him and maximize shooting. I'm assuming this is like if Tibbs has indeed lost faith in Grimes. But the RJ of the last couple of games in round 1 like needs to be on the floor.
Yep.
He not only was getting to the rim as usual, he was finishing with force. And
yes.
If he can hit threes, that's gravy. But just keep attacking the rim like that. Obviously, like you need some size out there whenever Jimmy's on the floor. So yeah, I think the 4-guard lineup, just because of Mitch's range defensively and on the boards, I think you could get away with, because who are the Heat going to play at the 4 to punish you for that? I think you'd actually match up nicely with the Bam and 4-guard, lineups that the Heat like to go to.
Yeah. I can't believe it took me this long to mention this, but Tibbs knows Jimmy. Jimmy came up under Tibbs. He coached him in Chicago. He coached him in Minnesota. Like, if anyone has ideas on how to slow Jimmy down, Tibbs is probably the guy. So I'm very curious to see what he tries to do to get him off his game.
Yeah, I think it just seems like the Knicks might not have the best player in the series, but Brunson, he could play better than anyone else in this series. He could be better than Jimmy. That's how good Brunson's been. That door is open. And the Knicks have so much more versatility, different looks. They can give you 2 big lineups, 1 big lineup. I don't know. It's the kind of series where I really want to see game 1 before I start pretending to have any clue what's going to transpire.
Yeah, God, second round in the Garden. And with the Heat rivalry, like the old history of those two, that's going to be so fun.
Sorry to do this to your heart. I know your knee's fucked up and heart problems would really be a bummer, but I want it to go to 7 as a neutral. I want game 7 in MSG so badly. And I'm going to try to get there somehow, some way.
I've already looked, and game 6 is on my birthday. And if there is a game 7, I will be in New York for it. So luckily the MRI room had Kings Warriors on.